49, Part 1 will stand part. We now move to Part 2. This is debate on clauses 4 to 98. The question is that Part 2 stand part.
Mr. Chair.
Dr. David Clark.
Mr. Chair, I'm delighted to take a call on Part 2 of the Income Tax Act. Labor will support the Remedial Matters Taxation, Annual Rates, Returns Filing and Remedial Matters Bill. Important to give the bill its proper name, Part 2. I'm delighted to take a call on Part 2, which addresses changes in the Income Tax Act 2007. There is a lot of meat in this part of the bill, although, as I've said in my earlier contribution, the really big issues facing the economy are not addressed in this bill. I wouldn't want it to be mistaken, my comment, for saying that I thought they were, but it does deal with a number of important issues, and some time was spent dealing with these in the Select Committee process. One of the issues was around taxation of bonus shares, and we find some interesting submissions from the Contact Energy and others on this issue. A concern that a share issued by a company under a profit distribution plan is defined as a dividend. Those who put submissions in on this matter, which appears in Clause 7 and other clauses in this part of the bill, raised a concern that this really might lead to a type of behaviour that was the opposite of saving, to dissaving. Whereas the government speaks currently a big game on saving, in fact, elsewhere in the asset sales legislation we find the government is actually trying to pay people loyalty bonuses to hold shares, quite the opposite to what seems to be the intention in this part here. We'll also note as we go on that in the KiwiSaver area the government has been all over the show. It's flip-flopped backwards and forwards on KiwiSaver, and all of that indicates that this government really doesn't have a plan for savings. It has a plan insofar as it has a plan one week and then it changes that plan back the other way the next week, Mr. Hayes. So it's a flexible plan, Mr. Hayes says. The National Party has flexible plans, and I think the truth has come out there. The plans do change from week to week, according to which way the wind's blowing, and probably very similar to the way in which, as my colleague Dr. Megan Woods points out, kids move in and out of poverty. Look, we don't accept that on this side. We don't think that these are trivial matters. As I raised in Part 1, we are very concerned about matters of poverty that are created through the current system of unfair tax distribution that we have in New Zealand, and we stand for a fairer tax system that is actually pro-economic growth. The Labor Party is keen to see our economy grow, as it did under the Labor government's last period of stewardship, 25% in real terms. The economic cake grew by a full quarter in real terms under the last Labor government. Under this government, real wages have dropped. So the issue of taxing bonus shares stands as an interesting little commentary in this part of the Act, because it says the government is discouraging saving, as it's done in other areas where it has been paying people in the asset sales area and has had quite different positions on KiwiSaver. Clause 17 in this part 2 of the bill, refers to software development write-offs and the deduction of liabilities for unsuccessful software development. We in the Labor Party support this measure because it is a way of ensuring that people are not discouraged from investing in this area, from developing intellectual property, and we wish to see this proceed because we need to be earning the really good margins that we get from our intellectual property, and there are real big opportunities in New Zealand in the area of information technology. We can play to that waitlist economy. We turn out, we're told, the 4th best students in the world according to PISA rankings, and long may that continue, so long as the Minister of Education doesn't disassemble our very highly functional secondary sector. And as long as we continue to turn out these graduates, we have the opportunity to capitalise on that for the growth of our economy, and this clause, which deals with write-offs in the software development area, is surely a good thing. Clause 96, I'm skipping about. There are many more clauses, and I'm sure the Minister will tell us of the many other useful small changes in this bill. We might classify them as tinkering, but many of them are indeed worthy changes. The Clause 96 talks about the changes to Schedule 28 and notes that 2% is replaced by 3%. The Minister can correct me, but I'm assuming that this refers to the KiwiSaver changes that appear also in the later part of the bill. And these changes to KiwiSaver rates are something, again, that we would support. It is excellent to see that the government is adopting a change. Mr. Chair.
Dr. David Clark.
It is excellent to see that the government is adopting a change of direction in respect of KiwiSaver. This is one of those flip-flops that we would applaud. We only worry that it may be something that they flip back on the other way. And if I could just for a minute say why that is a very real risk. If we look at what National did in December 2008, we can see that they cut the minimum contribution rates for employees and employers to 2%. It was to have been progressively raised to 4% or 8% default rate of gross income by April 2011 for employees and 4% default rate for employers. National cut that, and now in this legislation it's being brought back a little way. And we will see, no doubt, further changes. We're not sure which direction. Mr. Hayes describes it as a flexible policy. So we'll look for more announcements next week, perhaps from Mr. Hayes, perhaps from the Minister and the Chair, or perhaps from the member up there at the back, our good Chair of FEC. National in 2008 discontinued the employer tax credit, which effectively subsidised employers for their costs in providing KiwiSaver. They discontinued the fee subsidy of $40 per annum, which was aimed at ensuring accounts with low balances weren't eroded through taxes themselves. And, of course, they repealed the Employment Relations Act, which means that also made it harder for saving. And if we contrast that with Labor, who has had a much more consistent view on KiwiSaver, who indeed introduced KiwiSaver, the original KiwiSaver model was announced in Budget 2005, we saw incentives for members to save, a $1,000 kickstart for each member joining, a fee subsidy which the government confirmed to be $40 per member per annum, and a housing deposit subsidy of up to $5,000. Budget 2007 saw Labor build savings further, investing an additional $3.2 billion in KiwiSaver over 4 years. And those changes show a consistent policy from Labor of encouraging savings. Indeed, we've heard earlier contributors to the debate refer to the retirement savings system that was to be put in place, or that was put in place by the Labor government and later repealed by the National Muldoon government. And if that system had continued, we would have had several $100 billion worth of savings and had a much higher, undoubtedly much higher GDP as a country, as we would have had savings looking for a home, and that home would have been in good business ideas. We know that in Australia, who introduced a similar system later, they now have $1 trillion worth, an Australian $1 trillion worth of savings looking for a home, $1 trillion. And New Zealand has a very low savings rate because it was introduced only latterly in a comprehensive way by Labor, and then National has flip-flopped on that. So Clause 96, which replaces 2% with 3%, is a modest and tentative step by National, who are probably not yet sure whether they really believe it's a good idea or not. They are running out of opportunities to make changes because they don't seem to have any ideas, but they keep trying this little tinkering thing here and this little tinkering thing there. We've spoken earlier about the difficulties with implementing real change because the IRD's computer system is on its last legs. Mr. Dunn indicated that there would be announcements later in the year. I hope that we will get some very real progress soon. On Valentine's Day this year, the Prime Minister said it was an appalling position the government was in. That's a full 6 months ago, where the government couldn't introduce real change in the tax system. That has got to be a real real worry for New Zealand. Most Western economies have a tax system. In fact, I believe all Western economies have a tax system. It shouldn't be too hard to rebuild our one in line with those that are in operation elsewhere in the Western world. But if we don't do that, if we don't get onto that urgently, we will be stuck with a tax system that is falling over, that can't be implemented, that can't implement proper change, that can't make sure that we have the tax policies that we need to grow our economy rather than leave it in the stagnant position that it is in currently, where real wages have dropped under this government rather than grown, where unemployment has risen, and where we have migration to Australia at record rates, Mr. Chair.
Mr. Chairman.
The Honourable Peter Dunn.
Mr. Chairman, may I begin by responding to perhaps the last point that the member made relating to IRD's first